What's up, guys? Cards here, bringing you another video from Draft Day Sports College Basketball 2020, and today I'm going to bring you my top 10 tips for new players just coming into this game, trying to figure out how do we win, how do we get rolling. Let me set you on the right path right out of the gate. First of all, a lot of people want to know, how do I get my coach to the school that I want to get to? People love to do these kind of careers where you start off as a low prestige coach with not a lot of skills, and you start off at a small school and then you build your way up to somewhere like Louisville or Kentucky or UCLA, Kansas, a blue blood program like that. The way that you're going to draw interest from larger schools is to increase your coach's reputation. If you go into your coach's screen, you get a reputation level down here, and it'll actually give you a numerical value. The best way to increase this, guys, same as in real life, win games, and win games in March. Winning conference tournaments is huge. Your level of success in the NCAA tournament, especially if you're a major program, or if you're a small program, maybe your level of success in the NIT or one of the other smaller tournaments, that's how you're going to gain that reputation and draw interest from larger schools. And at the end of every season, you will get a screen where you advance and it'll say coaching jobs available. You can actually see in that screen there's a toggle toward the top that says show head coach jobs only. If you turn that on, it'll show you every program that's interested in having you as a head coach. And if you apply to one of those schools, you just get the job. Those are basically offers, is the way to think of that. So you can see what kind of schools are interested in you, and you can see their reputation and their prestige. And as your reputation increases, the prestige of the schools that are offering you a job is obviously going to increase. So win games in March, pay attention, slow down when it gets to tournament time. I know I'm a big simulator of lots of games at a time. Sometimes I'll just blow through December and January. When it gets into March, when you start playing tournament games, slow down and pay attention, because if you're trying to grow, that's where it's done. Next up, you want to know how to recruit. When you're coming in here and recruiting players, one of the extremely important things is to pay attention when it comes to contact time. These are your in-home visits. This is when you're going to see all of your head coach's recruiting ability really come into play. Prior to this, most of the recruiting is done by assistants. You can do some calls and maybe some in-person scouting, but that's not going to have a huge effect on a recruit's level of interest. When you do in-home recruiting, that is when you're going to start seeing commitments. That is when you're going to start seeing large jumps in recruits' interest. If your head coach is a good recruiter, all about in-home visits, guys. Make sure that you're contacting these players. You can see here I've got Eric Alexander to commit to Louisville. Come in and look at details. He's very interested in facilities, very interested in school prestige. Ideally, when you go in for an in-home visit, you'll have all of these unlocked, but I'd be more than happy to walk into this recruit's home and pitch him school prestige. And that's going to generate so much interest. You're so much more likely to bring recruits in at the in-home visit period. So if you look over here on the left-hand side, you can see there's a tab for key dates. This is your recruiting calendar. You can see you've got several contact periods. The main one is the September 11th through August 8th. That's when most of these early commitments are going to happen. There's going to be a huge portion of the top commitments in the country that come off the board during that period. So make sure that you've identified your top targets, that you've offered scholarships, and make sure you know what they want to hear, and go out there, get in those recruits' homes, and convince them to come into your program. Number 8, make sure if you've got star freshmen that you want to develop, get them some playing time. Playing time will absolutely help your freshmen develop as they go through their college career. Now, when it comes to playing time, there's a whole lot of things that you need to be taken into consideration. But I know people ask all the time, will playing time help these guys develop? And the answer is absolutely yes. You need to make sure that you're considering everyone's ability in the offenses that you're running, because people that know the offenses better will run it better. But in my experience, the more you get them on the court, the more and quicker they learn those offenses. So the other thing to take into account there, I know when players come in, there's a lot of people that get frustrated and say, I had highly rated freshmen and they're coming in and they don't look great. They have 1 star or they're low rated. Remember that those stars and those ratings are based off of your coach's ability to scout, and they're also based on the amount of information that your coaches have. The more they see that player, the better they're going to get a feel for their true ability. So those ratings may be incorrect. As those players come in, get more practice time, and get more playing time, you're going to get a better evaluation, something that's more true and accurate. So that can also help to get them out there on the court and give your coaches an opportunity to see them play. So if you've got freshmen that you think are the future of your program, find a way to get them on the court. Number 7, make sure that you are running offenses that your players know how to run. If you come over here in this dashboard, here's my roster, and I'll click on one of my upperclassmen. Here's Isley. You can look at his offensive proficiencies. He's pretty good at running the flex, the high post, and the 5 out. Those are going to be offenses that I'm going to want to focus on, even if eventually, say I want to be running shuffle. Well, it wouldn't be a great idea to run it this year because we're going to be losing all of this experience and all of this ability at these great offenses. So if you want to transition into a different offense over time, feel free to do that. Put some time in it in your practices, whether that's throughout the entire season, just 5 minutes every week, whether you want to hold off, run practice offenses they know early, and then toward the end of the season, maybe switch it over and go 30 minutes into an offense you want to learn for the next year. And then the other thing to take into account, though, is it depends on the program you're taking over. These ratings here, 72, 78, 81, those are fairly high. Those are pretty good ratings, and they're going to get a lot out of that experience when they get on the court. But if you're taking over a program that had a bad head coach and you're an excellent head coach, you come in and look and these numbers are all in the 40s as a senior who's been here learning these for 4 years from a bad coach, you might be able to implement this shuffle and get it up to 30 or 40 by the time March rolls around. So just take that into consideration, but it's vital that you're running offenses your players know so that you give yourself every possibility, every possible advantage to go out and win games. Number 6, recruit locally. There is absolutely no replacing local players when it comes to the recruiting trail. All of these things that recruits are interested in. If we come over here, we're going to open up the recruit players tab, and here we can go back and look at, we'll see if Alexander has a location rating. He does not. Thomas does. You can see here Thomas, he committed to the University of Kentucky, and he's out of Louisiana, which I believe is in the southeast region. But the important thing here, all of these ratings, they're not going to change. They can change year to year. You can get your school to be more prestigious. Playing time is going to vary based on your roster. You can get better facilities over time. But in this year, right now, the only thing you can really affect is location. If you're offering players that are in your home state, then they're going to value that location much more. If you're trying to recruit players from across the country, then you're taking a hit on location. Everything else stays the same, though. Like a point guard's playing time, there's no way to change that once you're here. Your academic score, there's no way to change that right now. But you can select different recruits and have a better impact on location. So focus on your home state first. Focus on pipeline states within your region second, then focus on non-pipeline states within your region, and then move out nationwide. So, recruit locally. It's going to give you a huge advantage, especially if you're at a very small school. Very small schools, I would suggest to almost exclusively recruit in-state. At the very least, stay in your region. Number 5 tip, get yourself a point guard. I have never seen teams fall apart so fast as when my senior point guard, who might be a 3 or 4 year starter, graduates and we move on to a freshman, even a talented freshman, unless it's maybe that top top 5, top 10 in the nation. Anything else, you just cannot replace a great point guard. It won't happen. They've got the ball in their hands so much throughout the game. If they've got a lot of experience running your offense, if they have high ratings on handling and passing, it's going to limit turnovers. It's also going to increase assists. And the more you have the ball, the more you're creating assists, the more points you're scoring, and the more games you're going to win. So if I were to focus on just one position, I would always make sure that my team had a rock solid point guard, and I would always make sure that I had one waiting in the wings coming up, maybe that bench player. If you've got a junior or senior point guard, you might want to find out who's going to be the next one in the line of succession. So get yourself a point guard. If I had a secondary focus, next I would go into center. Centers, they can just be so effective down in the post. If you get a good inside scoring center, a good rebounding center, that's going to be a huge benefit. If you can get a good defensive center, somebody that's going to shut down the other team's inside player, that's going to help you out too. So get yourself a point guard, and if you've got time, find a center as well. Number 4 tip, if you want to win games, go and hire yourself a recruiter. If you come down here into we can come up here to the top on staff. Here's the assistant coaches that I have right now. See my top number 1 assistant coach? He's got 4-star recruiting ability, and this is in my first season. I will look for somebody better as this goes on. I will always bring in an absolute top-notch recruiter, and I will generally have that be my first assistant coach, because that's the one that I'm going to be paying out the most money for. The coaching levels, the level and skill of the coaches that you can bring in is going to be dependent on what kind of school you're at and what kind of budget you have. But whatever it is, drop some money on a recruiter. Make him your number 1 assistant coach. You don't want to have a third assistant be the recruiter and then he leaves to take some second assistant job somewhere else or some first assistant job. Bring him in, make him your first assistant. They're your absolute most important coach, and pay them, because it's going to have a huge advantage. I told you earlier that your head coach, I've got this 5-star, 100 skill level recruiting coach. It doesn't really matter until I get into in-home recruiting. Before that, all the phone calls, that's all on this first assistant. So make sure that you are paying money there. If you want to go cheap somewhere, don't do it with your number 1 recruiting coach. Number 3, make sure that you have a consistent strategy when you start off a new job. Whether it's a new save, whether you've just changed schools, make sure that your overall philosophy, first of all, make sure that you have an overall philosophy, make sure you know what you want to do, and then stay consistent with it. We can come over here and look in my office. You can see some of our offensive pace, our crash boards, defensive intensity, things like this, full court defense. If you want to run a whole lot of full court defense, then you need to make sure that you have a practice plan and that you're set to learn some full court defenses. Same thing with zone defense. If you want to run a lot of zone, if you want to move this way up here, you need to be practicing zone defenses. If you come over here into your strategy, and here we are, and say you want to run a lot of 5 out. Well, if we look at the 5 out, this is going to be designed for teams with good perimeter players at all positions, people that can shoot the ball. The outside shooting rating is what's going to come into play here. Much of the time the ball's behind the arc, allowing for outside shots, the downside being very few offensive rebound chances. So don't recruit a team full of players that can't shoot and run a 5 out. Don't make 5 out your primary offense and then come over here and change your focus to heavy inside. Those things aren't going to make sense. I mean, the game's still going to run, it'll still play, but you're not maximizing your advantage if you don't have a consistent strategy. So set up your coaching philosophies, set up your strategy, set up your practice, and make sure that they're all moving toward the same thing. Number 2 tip. Please be aware of the scoring rating and what it does. If we come in here and look at our roster, this SCR right here stands for scoring. And you can see the best scorer on my team is right here, this freshman, Justin Joseph. He's 5-star all across the board. This right here is going to be the star of our team. And we've got some other guys that are 7s, and that's fine. They'll be good scorers as well. But this scoring rating is so huge. Make sure that you're paying attention to it. You don't want to leave this guy off the floor. He's our star. And I know that a lot of people, especially new players, are going to come in and look and be looking at maybe field goal inside and field goal jumper. And you look and you say, okay, well Ryan Murray here, he's got a 9 at field goal jumper. That's the guy I want to have the ball in his hands. Absolutely not. Right here, the scoring rating is 100% more important than either of these two ratings. This is what's going to get this guy points per game. Now, obviously having these higher would be great, but focus on scoring first. I try to explain this to some new players in some of my multiplayer leagues, and I tend to think of it like this. The field goal jumper, this is a pure shooting rating. There are guys in the NBA and college that are absolutely great shooters, but they might not be able to get their own shot, or they might not have a quick shot release. You've got most teams have some player down at the end of their bench that they only bring in with 10 seconds left to try to shoot a long range 3. That's the field goal jumper rating. That guy on the end of the bench that can nail 3-pointers, he's got a great field goal jumper. But if he's not able to create his own shot, if he's not able to get the ball off, if he doesn't take a high volume of shots, he's not a great scorer. Allen Iverson was a great scorer. He might not have been a pure 3-point shooter. He might not have had a great post game. He wasn't going down there and backing people down and shooting hook shots. He just scored the basketball. That's what this is. This is a playmaker. Focus on scoring when you're trying to find the stars on your team and you're trying to see who's really going to win you games. Number 1, the last tip, the thing that after I learned it sent me on a whole nother level in Draft Day Sports College Basketball 2020. When you're recruiting, pay attention to the camps. Every year, they're going to run 3 national camps, and then they're going to run a regional camp in each region within the game, with the exception of the international region. You can come in here and see on the details. Over here on the left, you get recruiting notes, and we can scroll down. Eric was definitely a top 10 player at the Indy Elite Camp. The Indy Elite Camp is, I believe, the top 100 or maybe top 200 players in the game. I want to say top 100. But regardless, this guy was a top 10 player. Now, that doesn't always mean he's one of the best 10 players available, but it's a pretty good sign that this guy is a player. And so when you take these camps into consideration, you're going to be seeing people that are actually doing it on the court. Everything else you're getting, statistics, those are great. You don't really know what level of high school competition they had. How much were they being focused on? How much was their coach giving them the ball? Those sorts of things. These statistics are great and they're important. You can also look at ratings. This will give you your scouts rating, and if you did in-person scouting live with your head coach, it'll give you your head coach's ratings, and all that'll be taken into account. These ratings will also be better if you attended camps that these recruits participated in. But again, these are just ratings. These are looking at it and evaluating it. The camps actually show you what these players are doing against other elite talent. So if you have players that were top 25 in the Indy Elite Camp, you almost certainly have a good player. Likewise, as you move down, if you're looking at in individual regions, the camp MVP of the Southeast region, that's probably a pretty good player. If you've got a guy that was MVP or top 5 in Indy Elite and he was MVP of his regional, that's even more. And you will see a lot of these guys that do great at Indy Elite or do great at the East Coast Jam. They're also doing great in their regional camps. Those are good players. Absolutely focus on them. On the other side of that, if you start looking at the top 100 recruits and you're looking at, maybe the 35th recruit, somewhere in that range, and it says he didn't really stand out at the elite camp and he didn't stand out at the regional camp, that would give me a lot of cause for concern. If I could find anybody that participated well in those camps that was in the top 25 or especially the top 10, I would absolutely focus on that before I would focus on somebody that didn't stand out. and it wouldn't necessarily matter their rating for me at that point. A guy at 35 who didn't stand out versus a guy at 75 who was top 25 at Indy Elite, I would take the number 75 guy every single time. Pay attention to those camps. You're going to get those notes, those recruiting notes about top 25 or top 10 in the camps if you have that player on your watch or call list and you attend the camp. So especially with smaller schools, make sure that you're loading up in region, and then make sure you're attending your region's camp so that you can get those recruiting notes on all of the players that you've targeted, and that'll tell you how well they participated in the camps. At the same time, this will be a free hint, but it goes along with the camps. You can look over here. This is an online league, so the emails are working a little bit differently, but even if it weren't, don't delete your emails. Because let's say I get here, we're in October 2nd. This is actually the last week of in-home recruiting. Let's say I get here and I've lost all of my targets at shooting guard. I don't have any idea, everybody I wanted that looked good is gone. Well, I can come over here and I can check out, okay, well, obviously I'm at Louisville and this is the West Coast, but I can look and see point guard Andre Salvi was MVP here. Got a power forward. Here we go. Here's a shooting guard, Tremaine Henry. I'm gonna go and take a look and see if he's available, and if he is, that's absolutely somebody I'll go after. I haven't been on him yet, but even if I haven't scouted him, even if I don't have a great feel for his ratings, if he did good in this camp, that's absolutely somebody I'll take a flyer on. So if you save those emails, you can actually go through and see each of the regionals, even though they weren't on your list, even though you didn't attend this camp, the emails will tell you who the top 5 were. So that's a big bonus, and especially this one, the national camp recap. Here's Indy Elite. These are the top 5 players at Indy Elite. If you scroll down, here are the top 5 players from the East Coast Jam. And then if you keep scrolling, here are your top 5 players from the Georgia Superstar Camp. This camp is sort of that next level of recruits. Like Indy Elite is the top. East Coast Jam is going to have a lot of top recruits mixed in with some mid-level. Georgia Superstar Camp is more mid-level. To me, this is where, those schools in that 50 to 60 prestige range, they can really clean up at the Georgia Superstar Camp. These guys are going to be good. They can even come in and play at some of those blue blood programs. They might need a year or two to develop, but they're going to be good players. So make sure that you focus on camps. If you're bringing in players that are high rated, have good scouting ratings, have good statistics, and are performing well in camps, you are going to win games, you're going to make Final Fours, and you're going to win championships. I guarantee it. So those are my top 10 tips for Draft Day Sports College Basketball 2020. If you disagree with them, if you've got better tips, leave me a comment. Let me know what you're thinking. I'll be happy to address it in the comments. And if you've got great ideas, we'll throw up another video and we'll talk about it. So make sure that you're hitting that like button. Make sure that you're subscribing. Make sure you're getting all the notifications when GM Games puts out new videos. They got great videos on Draft Day Sports College Basketball, other Draft Day Sports games, other GM games. You want it all. If you're running GM games, if this is the kind of game that interests you, make sure that you're signing up and getting all that information. So I hope that you learned something. Let me know if you've got other ideas. This is Cards. I hope you appreciated the video, and I'll see you next time.